Yeah, she could have got tied up. I know last week we had tech issues, so it was just not working with her audio, so we couldn't hear her. So hopefully it's nothing like that today. But we live, so we just gonna go ahead and jump on and jump in and get started. And then as she joins us, she can be a part of the conversation. But I'm glad to have you back. I'm just going to double check that it is live on my page, and we are live and showing and streaming on my page. And so that means that we got it going. We live. We here.
Live.
We made it. We live. We made it. We here. And how you doing, Hashima? Thank you for coming back. I'm excited to have you again today to have this super important conversation. I'm so glad that you said you wanted to have this conversation. I'm a big believer in any day is a good day to start making resolutions and making change. Like you don't have to wait to like the first of the year to do all of that. I love to start making changes immediately once I realize they're needed. But as we head into the new year, I think it's a very important conversation for us to have and talk about how past pain can stifle us, can continue to haunt us, can continue to follow us. And so when you said you wanted to have this conversation and come back, I'm like, perfect. It's right on time. And hopefully it'll give people a lot of food for thought moving into the new year. If we do have those resolutioners who are out there, like, I like to have resolutions, I like to write them down, I like to have in front of me, what things I want to change in the future, etc. But just for the person that's like, I need to make change today, and you can start right here, right now, 12/28, 2022. You do not have to wait until January 1st. So again, thanks for joining, Hashima. What made you want to have this important conversation? Because you said this was heavy on your mind, heavy on your spirit. What made you want to come back so we could talk about this?
Yeah. So first, let me say, where are we live at? What platforms are we on?
So we are live on Facebook Live. That across my personal page, you can find the live stream. It is public by Sante Harden Tate. I'm the only Sante Harden Tate on Facebook. I will not be difficult to be found. The stream is public on that page, so you will be able to see it even if we're not friends. You can also watch the stream from our page, our show page, which is We Gon Talk on Facebook. We're live on YouTube, we're live on Twitter, and we're live on Twitch. So you can find the live stream on any of those platforms. If you are having trouble, Hashima, you can go to my page and reshare or share the stream to your followers, and they should be able to connect it also. But you can find the stream on those platforms just mentioned by We Gon Talk. For YouTube, it's just how you see it here in the background. So you should be able to find us. And you can also search it on Google. It pops up on Google also.
Got it. Okay. So let me just say, Sante, you have broken the ice for me with social media. I have never gone live on social media. So thank you for introducing me to this platform in this way and in this space. So thank you for that.
Of course, you got some important stuff to share, and this is one of the best places to reach people far and wide. Trust me, this was a baby in my mind for a long time, and if I hadn't had the push a couple years ago, I probably still would be scared. I wouldn't be live either. So sometimes we just need that push into the deep end. Yeah. Welcome, and now you got your feet. You can run now. Get it moving.
Yeah. So thank you for having me. And, as you mentioned, this is an extremely important topic. One of the things that I just see, not only just personally in my life, but also, specifically in the therapeutic process when, I'm supporting those that I work with professionally. Much of what has people stuck is their inability to release past experiences on an emotional level. And so, my hope is that, when we come into this space tonight, that we're able to share some tools. I want to share some tools and just kind of talk through some things to support people as it relates to, the liberation connected to, what past experiences have meant for us, paying homage to them, but equally letting them be what they are, past experiences. And so for me, this topic is very near and dear to my heart in that way, because not only do I meet many people who have been unable to release past experiences on their own, but equally, people who believe that they have released past experiences, but in essence, they truly haven't. Any of the hurts or the pains that they've experienced is heavily a heavy driver within their current experiences, and their future basically in this moment. So, one of the things I want to lead out by saying, because unforgiveness, I think, is heavily connected to the inability at times to release past experiences. So that's one thing. So the first thing I want to say is, forgiveness is for us, and I know forgiveness is one of those buzzwords that people, often throw around, but ultimately forgiveness is for us. I think Buddha, he has an amazing quote. He had an amazing quote that I often use connected to forgiveness. And so what he said is, holding unforgiveness in your heart is like holding hot coal, expecting somebody else to get burned. So meaning you're the only person that feels it. You're the only person that is having an experience of it. Many times that person or those people or that circumstance has moved beyond this moment, this time, this space and time. And you're right there by yourself, just still holding on to something that a person is ultimately giving all their power to. And so, that's one element, that unforgiveness.
And I want to add a little bit to that unforgiveness portion, because something that I had to learn and that I've been sharing far and wide is that sometimes we think that we have forgiven somebody or a situation because we're not angry with them. And it's like, well, I'm not angry, or I don't, have any animosity towards them. I'm not holding a grudge, right? But the more you start to do your healing work and you start to do that reflection and that process, you realize that forgiveness is not just about not holding a grudge, not just being angry at that person anymore. Sometimes it's just that it still has the power to hurt you. And if you think about it, if you can recall it and you can feel that same thing that you felt when the initial thing happened, then you haven't really forgiven. And it doesn't mean you got to forget when you forgive either. You think, well, I got to forget and act like it never happened. No, that's not in the rule book for forgiveness either. What it just really means is that you're letting go of the hold that whatever that pain, whatever that transgression had on you, you're letting go of the hold that it has over you, the power that it has over your emotions, your thought process, your behaviors, how you connect with people, what things you're willing to do to put yourself out there again. So I just wanted to take a moment and talk about that, because that was something that was really important for me. It was like, but I'm not mad at this person. I'm not angry. I don't wish any ill will on them. Like, I'm fine. But then as I started to really do my deep dive, I was like, no, if I could think about it and it still makes me sad and I want to cry, I haven't forgiven them yet. I haven't moved to that point. And there's stages in that too. So thank you for bringing up that portion about harboring unforgiveness and how it stifles us, it stagnates us from being able to grow.
Yeah, no, for sure. And, I think when we talk about unforgiveness, it's really the ability to connect with ultimately what that person, that circumstance or situation came to teach. And equally, one of the things I think that many people miss in that process is, if we don't catch the lesson, we're just going to go same class, new teacher, same class, new teacher. Oftentimes I hear people say, I always meet the same kind of person, or I always draw the same kind of situations at my job, or this, that, or the other. And ultimately coming to grips with, you're the common denominator.
All the time.
You know, what did you not gain or get from that experience that you're supposed to gain? The people that have hurt us the most have ultimately come to be our biggest teachers. And you know, maturity within growth is being able to say thank you for being who my growth needed you to be, because ultimately when we grow, that's what's creating the change. Comfort is beautiful, but nothing is growing there. You know, it's the people that have caused us the most pain, have hurt us the most, that have come to be our biggest teachers in how we're supposed to evolve in this life. And so, you know, one of the things that I do personally, and I would encourage anybody to do that is having a hard time just releasing past experience, is looking at each experience and ultimately saying, what was I supposed to get from this? What was I supposed to gain from this? You know, it all starts and ends with us. You know, blame is a lot easier than guilt. And so when we experience something, you know, intrinsically our ego jumps to want to blame, but ultimately rarely, if ever, is something somebody else is doing is about us. You know, people are doing what they know to do from their place and understanding in the world, and you know, from the place that they're in. So, you know, ultimately it's about, why did they come to mirror this to me in this moment and in this space and time within my life?
And you have to do their work. And it's hard. The hardest part is when and I tell people about the whole healing journey. And when most people jump out of doing therapy, like they'll get to that point where it's all fun and games in therapy when you could talk about how people hurt you, right? And you can really feel validated in the space. So you going off on, this person did this to me, and this affected me when I was growing up, and my mama this, and my daddy this, right? But then once you get past the fact of, okay, we validate that these things happened. We validate how they affected you over the process of your life, over the course of your life. But how did you play a role in the way people hurt you past that point? Or how do you play a role in not moving forward past that pain that your parents or whomever, you know, inflicted on you? And when you have to start to do the reflection work of, okay, how am I being an accomplice in my own pain? Because ultimately, and that's one of my favorite sayings, that I'm the common denominator. I always take that when I'm doing my reflection work. Every experience I have, I'm like, how do I factor in this? How am I the common denominator in some of these things? And when you start to mature in your healing growth, you realize that in doing that, you're not absolving the other person from what they did or the things that they did wrong. You're not validating the behavior that they had. What you're doing is recognizing how the only one thing that you have control over in the situation is yourself. What you're doing is recognizing how you can have a better control over you and make it better moving forward. So if you encounter this thing again, you won't handle it the same way, or you'll recognize how you've inflicted some of that own harm on yourself. And when people get to that fork in the road in therapy, that's the hardest part. That's when it gets to the trenches and you got to crawl on your elbows and your knees, and you got to be like, okay, you know what? I have to talk about the me work. And it's hard for us to do that because we get comfortable in our victimization, right? It's like all of these things are happening to me, so everybody else is wrong. And it's never like, but I'm doing some of this, or I'm reading into this the wrong way, or perhaps I misjudged this, or I got, ahead of myself. And we have to do both. We have to both hold others accountable, but it starts with holding accountability for ourselves. So I completely agree with you in that common denominator factor. You hit me with that one, when you hit me.
No, so true. And one of the things I want to tap on right now is trauma responses. Because our trauma responses are heavily connected to our inability to release past pain. And our trauma responses kick in when our nervous system remembers and is ultimately on process overload when it's remembering some past pain, likely that we haven't released, or healed from. And so I want to touch on that for a second, Sante, because I've learned that many people are not aware of their trauma responses. And if you are alive and breathing, you have a trauma response. We all do. And what that means is it's a way for our nervous systems to protect us when we feel on process overload. And so, many times, people, I often say in the therapeutic process that as much as people should understand the love language of the people closest to them, you should equally aim to understand the trauma response of the people closest to you, because trauma responses can be taken very personally, and they can be internalized, and they ultimately can kind of bleed into causing friction within connected relationships. So I want to touch on a few of the trauma responses, and I want to touch on all of the trauma responses and just kind of lightly toss out behaviors connected to those. And if you're out there and you're listening to us and you are not aware of your trauma response, see if you hear yourself in one of these that I'm going to toss
or
out.
more than one, because you can have multiple trauma
responses. That's definitely true. Now that is
different trauma
true.
responses. It depends on what the trauma is. So sometimes, a certain trauma will make me want to have the flight. So I'm like, I got to get out of here. Like, I don't want to have nothing to do with this, right?
Yeah.
And then there's those trauma responses where I shut down and I'm inaccessible, and I have a barbed wire electrical fence around me. You just can't reach me. I'm impervious to emotion, right? And then sometimes my trauma response is me just crying because I let it build up. So we can have different trauma responses, but I'm glad that you're bringing that up, Hashima. Share with the people the different types of trauma responses that there are, and you undoubtedly will hear yourself in more than one of these at times, and it depends on where you are in your healing journey. That has mattered with my trauma response, or in my healing journey for that particular harm, that particular pain. So share with the people about those trauma responses, and then let's talk about them a little bit if we can.
Absolutely. And like I said, just for the sake of time, I'm just going to touch on a few highlighted behaviors connected to certain trauma responses. And what I really want to draw out too, to your point, Sante, people can kind of sway and have an ebb and flow between multiple ones, but most often we all have a default trauma response, which is generally kind of the one that's going to play out, even if some of the other ones kind of seep in there as well. So if you are someone like me, I have a flight trauma response. If my nervous system is on overload, I'm out of there. I'm gone. I tell the people closest to me, if I'm running, don't internalize it. Come get me. Okay. My trauma response has kicked in. And so generally a person with a flight trauma response can be a workaholic. They are generally overthinkers. They may be someone who heavily struggles with anxiety. Somebody who has a difficulty sitting still. They always have to be doing something, always have to be moving around. Okay. If that is you, your trauma response will be considered flight. You have to keep moving, keep going. Then we have our fight trauma response. So those are people when their systems are on process overload, they may have angry outbursts. It can look aggressive. It can look controlling. It can appear to be, and I hate to use these buzz diagnoses that pop out there, but it can look narcissistic, explosive behavior. And then we have those who have a freeze trauma response. And this person, they just freeze. They have difficulty making decisions. They're indecisive. They're stuck. They may experience disassociation, where they just completely disconnect from the circumstance or the people or the situation altogether. Numbing, isolating, things like that. And then we have fawn, which are the people pleasers. Okay, so when their system is on process overload, they want everybody to be happy. Okay. And so they immediately go into people pleasing. And this person generally doesn't have boundaries. They have a serious lack of boundaries. They get overwhelmed. And oftentimes these personalities are extremely codependent personalities. So they depend heavily on taking care of others, being there for others, so that they don't have to, they want everyone to be happy and agreeable. And so that is our fun people. So when you hear those out there, where do you fall? Where do you fall in question? I can't see people typing, Shantae. So
No, and I see a couple responses here in the chat. Danica, I hope I am saying that correct. Understand that if I get your name wrong, let me know, because I take that very seriously. Nobody gets my name right in the first stance, and it frustrates me because I'm not Shantae, I'm Sante. So if I didn't get that right, Danica, feel free to shout at me in the chat. She said, I'm flight. Toya says, that's me, people pleaser, codependency. And Danica said, yes, I'm correct. Thank you. Thank you. I'm trying. Thank y'all so much for sharing where you see yourself in those different types of trauma responses. But you know, Hashima, I'm still standing toes down to I'm a lot of those at different points. I am not just one. And here is why I say that. Different traumas have triggered me in different ways. So for example, when I am experiencing grief, I am fawn. I am people pleaser. I freeze. I also freeze because I get numb. So my first trauma response from hearing the loss of someone, because I've had so much grief in my life, is I immediately go numb. I don't cry right away. I don't express the emotion right. It takes a while, and it surfaces at some weird random point where it's just like, oh, not now. I'm not feeling the grief now, like not now. But initially I freeze and I don't have anything. I'm just numb. Then I start taking care of everybody else. Let me do this. Let me help with the arrangements. What do you need? How can I be a support for you? No, don't worry. I got you. And I'm running around helping everybody else because I don't want to think about my own grief because it's just too much. When I'm in the professional environment, I kind of sway between fight and flight. So I may fight because the advocate in me, and having an advocate background, I am my best advocate if I can advocate for myself too. If I know how to advocate for me, then I'll be able to advocate for others. If I don't know how to speak up for myself, I'm not going to be able to speak up for people in the way that they need to. Even though folks say it's easier to speak up for someone else than you, that's not always true. And so when it comes to a professional environment, I fit in the whole fight or flight. It depends on what it is. So I think more recently, as I'm trying to not be placed in a box of aggressive, of angry, I try to do the flight, where it's like, okay, I don't want to do this. I just need to get out of it. It's just too much. I don't want to go down this road again. I can't deal with it. But before it was, oh, you're not going to talk to me like that.
Yeah.
You're not going to do me like that.
Yeah.
So you can kind of ebb and flow, to your point, between
I like that.
More of me.
Yeah.
Go ahead. You said you like that.
Yeah, I like that analogy that you use, of how some people can, sway, between different ones. I don't, and I like that we have this variety here in this space of you being able to say, I have an ebb and flow. Whereas me, it's gonna be flight every time. I'm overstimulated, I'm gone, and I'm not coming.
Can we talk about, because I think that it's really important to not just be able to recognize that there are trauma responses, but recognize when they're happening. Like, what kind of signs can people look for when they could be like, because for example, when I talk about the people pleasing, it's what do you need help with? Like, what do you want me to do? Like, I'm bouncing around. I don't want to sit still in my own thoughts, right? And then more recently, as I've learned that that's a trauma response for myself, I have to say, you know what? this is going to surface in a way I don't want it to. I have to take a pause. Give the people, and for those of you that don't know from our past show, Hashima is a clinical therapist. So anything she's telling you, she knows what she's talking about. She got the credentials, okay? She's not just speaking without knowing. So she has an extensive background, professional background in clinical therapy, clinical counseling, etc. So talk about some of those things that people can look for in their behaviors when they're starting to do the flight, the fight, the fawn, the freeze.
Yeah, so I think, so we started with the flight. And so, I think, again, those are, excessive overthinkers. I think with any of these, comes a level of self-awareness that's needed. But not only self-awareness, equally just awareness of those that you're around and connected to. Because if you notice that, what the people closest to you's trauma response is, it also helps you not to take it so personally.
Mm-hmm.
And so, again, just jumping the flight, that was the one we started with, the overthinkers, the workaholics, the people that just have to keep busy. Okay, anything in excess is ultimately some level of avoidance of something else. Okay, so thinking of it, in that way. And I think it's easy to see a workaholic, it's easy to see an overthinker. I am definitely an overthinker. I say that I even say it. I say, I know I'm overthinking right now,
Mm-hmm.
in my conversations. And so, being able to recognize that, but it lets me know, again, that's my internal system, my defense mechanisms kicking in place, because my system is on overload and trying to protect me. So in all of these, I do want to say, before we jump to the others, anytime we're recognizing these, it's a moment to take a step back and say, okay, what am I avoiding? What is it that I'm avoiding, or what that what is it that I'm triggered by?
Mm-hmm.
And so when we talk about, fight, anytime a person feels internally threatened, for lack of a better term, that fight mode kicks in. This is likely a person throughout their life, specifically possibly in younger years, where they had to heavily defend themselves.
Absolutely.
And so, they may be in a place of, I'm not going to maybe let people take advantage of me anymore. So there are mental tapes. We all have mental tapes we play in our head. And if we talk to people long enough, we can just kind of hear some of the tapes that are playing in their head. And just jumping back to flight, those are people who have experienced heavy emotional upsets most often. You can almost trace, anybody who has a flight trauma response likely has had some serious emotional breaches
Mm-hmm.
in life, as it relates to love and trust and attachment and things connected to that. And then, again, with the fight, someone who has felt, taken advantage of at some point, because we learn our trauma responses generally somewhere between the ages of about 2 and 10-ish, was kind of where our trauma responses set in, because something has taught us in our life experience that this is what we need to do to protect ourselves. And then ultimately we just carry it with us throughout the lifespan and throughout our life experience. People that freeze were generally likely children who did not have the ability to make their own decisions early in life. People made decisions for them a lot of times. So, we play how we've been taught to practice. So, if I always say, we got something to learn from these animals when it comes to raising kids, because from the moment they have their child, they're training them for adulthood. Not humans. We coddling it all the way as long as we can.
We try. I think we try to prepare them for adulthood. But one of the things I tell people all the time, in my own healing journey, I realized that I was just a functioning adult. And there's a lot of functioning adults walking around. Like, we're not healthy. We don't really, have a good sense of understanding of our trauma or how things are affecting us. We become carbon copies in a lot of ways of what we saw, what we've grown up with, what examples we had around us. And I got to a pivotal point in adulthood where it was like, damn, I'm just a functioning adult, but I'm not healthy. I'm not happy. I'm not okay. I just learned how to play the game, do the work, keep moving, get up. In the Black community, especially for Black women, it was nothing else. There was no other option from my mother. Like, you're going to be a Black woman. Black women have it tough. You're going to have to get up, pull yourself up by the bootstraps and keep it moving. Like, there's no time for that. There's no time for this. You got to keep moving. And so what we teach our kids is functionality. We don't teach them survivorship in a sense of being healthy and being okay. But we think we're surviving. We're just existing. And so I like that you brought that up, that in the WOW, they're giving them skills. They're giving them things that they can use that's going to help them throughout the course of their life. And we try to do that as human beings, but it's hard to do that when we didn't really have those examples and we didn't really have someone teaching us those things and giving us those things in a proper manner. So I definitely agree with you on the kid factor.
Yeah. I mean, it's that piece, and it's the piece of subconsciously, I think oftentimes people operate like we have switches in our back, like, oh, okay, 21, grown now. You should know how to do this. Well, if I didn't practice this, how would I know to do it? So, again, jumping back over to freeze, it can be heavily connected to, I know a lot of homes, where children grew up, where children were to be seen and not heard, and all of these different cliche statements. And so, ultimately, I often in a therapeutic process encourage people, let your child have some level of a voice, because ultimately, and even with my own children, telling them to advocate for themselves and not telling them what they want, finishing their sentences, because ultimately, we'll have a generation of children or a lot of children. And even now we have a lot of adults who do not have just common communication skills and are very avoidant of communicating because the muscle was never strengthened, and so anyway, that's heavily connected to freeze. Generally, you can trace freeze right back to somebody who somebody told them. So now it's like, okay, now I have to make this decision on my own. So the response is just to kind of be stuck and frozen in that moment. And then the fawn is heavily connected to, codependency. And, the codependency is heavily attached to attachment, rejection type issues. You can trace that back to early childhood as well. I want people to be happy with me. I want people to notice me. And so, that is, heavily connected to that piece.
So we have some good comments and questions in the chat. So, I want to make sure that I'm uplifting y'all voices, acknowledging y'all. I appreciate y'all coming in here, even opening up. Like, this is the whole reason that there is, we gonna talk. We have to talk about these generational curses, these generational traumas. The goal is for us to start breaking those curses and those generational traumas so that our generations can get better and better over time, because we don't have these conversations. So the fact that y'all showing up in these comments just really makes me excited and happy. Thank y'all for being in these comments. So I see there was a couple questions I answered for TJ. She wanted to know, the overworking, which one is that? And I responded with flight. We have Marcellus. Again, if I get your name wrong, check me in this chat. I am not trying to butcher your name. I want to get it right. Marcella says, I overthink everything to the point I feel like it's a flaw of mine. We got Toya saying, I overthink all the time. LJ says, good evening. Hey, Hashima, I can go between flight and flight and fight. We have Toya again that says, damn, I have flight trauma too. Toya in these comments, I see you, Toya. Thank you for showing up. She says, I think we try to protect them from adulthood instead of preparing them. Marcellus is saying, yup, he agrees with Toya on that. I think to the comment of how, as a Black woman in our community, we are not taught to feel emotions, to keep, we got to keep going. We got to ignore certain things. Toya's comment is Black men too. As a child, we tell them that boys can't cry, be a big boy. Absolute facts. Lakita, I hope I'm saying it, or Laquita, if I got it wrong, please check me in these chats. It says, then they grow up to be men who can't handle their emotions. Facts. Marcellus, it's hard to stop doing things a certain way when it's been taught one way for so long. Generational curses, all facts. I see a lot of just uplifting Laquita and an agreement to Marcellus that that's true. It's not even all communication, it's about understanding. And you speaking language for me, Marcellus, one of my key things that I am on a mission to do is talk more about social emotional learning. And so in emotional intelligence, I have the emotional intelligence conversation wherever I can, wherever I go, because that's a big factor in communication gaps also when we're talking about those generational traumas. Toya has a question of, how do we get codependency? Because I have it. And where does it come from? Marcellus said, we can tell a person how to treat us, but if they don't understand, it helps none. 100% facts, Marcellus. I see you. Toya says, I just want to make everyone happy. And I think that, Linda said, only child codependency. Is that a thing? And I think that no, children can be codependent. Adults can be codependent. I think we overlook it with children and adolescents because they're kids. So of course they have to have some codependency, right? They can't fend for themselves. They can't take care of themselves. But in adulthood, that codependency factor is very unhealthy. It's one of those things that we're inflicting our own harm, our own pain. We are the common denominator, and that Hashima was just talking about earlier. And so children having codependency, that happens. But I think we see that a lot in like friendships, their peers wanting to connect to their friends and be a part of the in crowd. So they become codependent on some of those relationships. If they're dating, they can have codependency in those relationships. And Hashima, touch on Toya's comment where they're asking about, where the codependency comes from.
Yeah. So let me jump back, and I think we can touch on a few people's comments as it relates to, even can only children be codependent. So what happens when it comes to children? So I don't know if people out there are familiar with Erik Erikson's stages of psychosocial development. Okay, and if you're not, check it out on a random read if you want, or I would love to talk about it at a sidebar when we have more time. You can always message me. But what happens in our life is codependency happens, and I can't go through all the stages, we don't have time, but codependency happens in a phase called initiative versus guilt, and that's kind of like preschool age. And what happens is ultimately something happens within that child's attachment, okay, where something has created them to either not feel safe in the world, feel some levels of rejection, feel some levels of inferiority, and abandonment, absolutely. And what Erikson says is, if we get arrested in one of these psychosocial stages of development, we pretty much, even though we grow up and we're in these bigger bodies, emotionally, we have not moved past that stage where the arrests initially, or the offense, initially happened. And so codependency is created within that stage. And ultimately what codependency is the inability to, really be able to have equal energy exchanges is what I'll call them, within connection. And ultimately the need to be needed in order to, validate, that I'm important, that I'm significant. So all of those inferiority type of things as it relates to what we just talked about, the attachment issues, the rejection, and we can experience those things from primary caregivers. And so anytime we feel in primary caregiving early on, we feel those what are called breaches in our attachment. And that's ultimately the beginning of us feeling unsafe in the world.
Yeah, and I think what's really important is those abandonment issues, those attachment issues when it's a parent that's either absent. I tell people all the time that absentee parents are not worse than present parents that are absent. That is a real thing where you have parents that are present, but they're not emotionally accessible. They're not, participating in the child's life. They're literally are just there. They're like furniture in the room. And so a lot of that rejection that you were talking about, Hashima, stems from not measuring up, feeling like you can't do enough to get that I'm proud of you, or to have those parents acknowledge you or validate you. Every kid needs to be validated as a child. They need to know that they matter. They need to hear it. When they don't get those things, they look for them in other ways. One of the things my father and my brother always said to me growing up was that was super important for them, that I got that male validation, that I felt seen, that I felt loved, I felt admired, because their fear was I was going to grow up and have toxic relationships, and I was going to end up dating men that exploited that, right? So, I was showered and doted on by them because they needed me to know that I mattered in that respect, because if I didn't get it there, I was going to look for it out there, right? And so when we see a lot of some of the behaviors in adults, I know, I'm going to make some people mad when I say this, but even in your dating behaviors, who you shacking up with, who you dealing with, who you found yourself really constantly going when they say, I keep attracting the same guys. I think you were touching on that, Hashima, earlier, or I keep finding myself with the same type of people. That can be linked to that codependency. That could be linked to that abandonment. That could be linked to that attachment issue. And so when we talk about doing the healing work of that past pain, this is why we say it's important, because there's no escaping it. It's gonna surface in any aspect of your life. You don't outgrow it. You can't outrun it. It will follow you undoubtedly. And so just to bring it back around and circle back around to the importance of the conversation tonight about letting go of that past pain, part of the letting go process is acknowledging it and even coming to terms with the fact that it exists and finding the root to where it came from so that you can deal with that root issue. You can pull it up from the root. That's what we do with the weeds, right? Because if you just take the head of it off, you're going to come back out. Them dandelions going to be everywhere. It's going to be all in your garden. It's going to be here and there. Like, you have to pull it up from the root. And so just being sure that we're driving that point in, letting go of that past pain, is from the root. So you have to pull it out from there. There were a few more things that you wanted to cover in this conversation. We try and not keep y'all past the hour, because I know some of y'all still got to go to work and it's the middle of the week. And we want to respect that, but we want you to get this healing. We want you to get all of this important information. So what were some of the things that you wanted to talk about with the strategy part of how we get to the point of letting go of this pain? Because that part is like super important.
Yeah. So, step one is really acknowledging that it happened, and it happened for a reason. Okay. And, really coming to terms with releasing the blame. And once we release the blame is where, the true healing begins. I always tell people, if you just show me where you're blaming, I can almost point you to your own wound. And so, I think releasing the blame and feel motivated in releasing the blame. So one of the things that I think is very motivating within, being able to move ourselves forward from past pain is the fact that whatever can't come through us can't come to us. Okay. So if I've been hurt, let's just say in a loving relationship, I think that that's something that everybody can, identify with at one point in their life or another. And I
Facts.
decide I'm never going to love again, or I'm not going to offer love again. Ultimately, what I'm saying is, I'm ultimately blocking love for myself. If I'm not allowing it to come through me, then it can't come to me. And
Mm.
so, in all things, asking ourselves, what are some of the things that I want to come to me? What are some of the things that I want to draw into my life? And then become those things. And so, not letting past, circumstances warp us in that way. So coming to terms with what happened, why did it happen for me, and gaining the lesson. I have met people who have said, I can't see the lesson. I don't know what it is. I can't make sense of it. And those are the people that I want to strongly encourage to connect to a therapeutic process.
Mhm.
Okay. Because here's the thing. All the time, your friends or some of the closest people to you, they may not be objective in that way either, you know. And so, to have a neutral party who can really kind of help you to, process out and walk you through what maybe happened within your life that made you draw in that kind of connection, can be, a heavy support. And, hey, I know it's some people out there that are still like, I don't know about the therapy thing. I might not be ready for that, or this, that, or the other. One of the things to look at, if you're trying to dissect it on your own, here's a little tidbit. If you try one out there trying to dissect it on your own and figure out what was my lesson in something, many times we are drawn to the things we reject. So, oftentimes, we're very focused on, most people talk from the direction of what they don't want and not what they do want. So, I might say, Sante, what type of house do you want? Well, I don't want one.
Is this?
Go straight to what they don't want. And within that type of conversation, you can ultimately find some of your wound pieces there, because you're running from those, but equally understanding where we put our attention is where we put energy. So if you're focused on what you don't want, you focused all the time on what you're not trying to draw, you're giving that all of your attention. So intrinsically, you will kind of draw that to you. And so
Energy, you'll draw that energy to you, and you manifest that. And that is something that I think we don't really talk about, and how we're brought up to think about the what don't we want to do next time. Like when you got in trouble as a kid, your parent be like, what are you not going to do next time? What have you learned from this to not do? It's not, what have you learned to do differently? How can you do something else moving forward? It's mostly, how do you not want to make this same mistake again? And so we kind of internalize that, and it becomes so ingrained in our thought that we don't even realize, to your point, we're drawing in that energy. We're kind of bringing that to, or bringing ourselves to that thing we don't want to do. And so I agree with you 100% with that. I didn't mean to cut in, but you hit me with that one, Hashima. Go ahead.
No, it's so true. We heavily draw at times, the things that are normal to us, because it gets all our attention. It gets all of our focus. So I would encourage people to talk from a direction of what you do want. So if I say, oh, Sante, what type of house do you want? Or Kim, what kind of man do you want? Or John, what kind of woman do you want? Don't intrinsically start from, well, I could tell you what I ain't gonna do, or what I don't want, and more so talk from the direction of what it is that you are trying to draw. So something just dropped in me, Sante, and this was completely unplanned.
Okay.
But I'm looking at our time, so I'm gonna jump in there and I'm gonna step out there. This is something I never do, but I'm going to step out there and do it in this moment. I feel I should. So I want to open it up, Sante, if it's okay, for anybody to ask any type of therapeutic question that they would want to ask in this moment.
Absolutely. We do like those questions. The whole point is for people to walk away feeling fed in some way, for them to take something away from here. So feel free to pop that in the chat. I am watching those chat comments. So if there's a question that you have that you want to ask Hashima, feel free to go ahead and do that in the chat right now. I want to also, while we wait for those to pour in, Hashima, just go back to one of the things that you just mentioned about the what part of we don't want and making sure we're not focusing on that. I want to validate y'all that sometimes you may not be sure exactly what it is that you do want. Yeah. So you may be focusing on the what you don't want, because I have found myself saying, I know what I don't want because I'm not sure what I want at this point. I thought I knew and I don't know. I'm not even sure if this aligns with what I actually need, because the closer you get to that healing stage, you realize that you sometimes want things that you don't need, and you need to want things that you do need. And so you may not know what you do want. So that doesn't mean, you have to have it figured out. It's okay for you not to have it figured out. We just don't want you to only think from the place of what you don't want, because that's exactly what you will get. We don't want you to get that. So it's okay if you're not sure exactly what you do want, but just don't put so much stock in, so much energy into what you don't want, so that you can make space for what you do need and what you do want. So Toya has in our comments, how do I release codependency?
So that's a heavy process. It's probably more time than we have in this moment. I would say to Toya, if she is not connected to a therapeutic process, because it's not a 1-2, it's not even a 5-6.
It's not a 5 count.
Yeah, no, it's not. It's some consistent codependency releasing work that has to be connected to that. And so I would say, Toya, the first step is that you're acknowledging today that this is a thing for me. Okay. I would say if you are not ready in this moment to connect to a therapeutic process, there's a woman that wrote a book that is amazing as well. Her name is Melanie Beatley, and it's called Codependent No More. Okay, so if you want to look into that, opposed to maybe entering a therapeutic process, she has step-by-steps at the end of every chapter that are really, really good as it relates to the different steps that can be taken on the journey to releasing codependency. Yeah, Codependent No More. It's her book.
I am trying to get that for y'all, at least a link in the chat for those that are interested, where you can possibly go and check that book out. So be looking out for that in the chat shortly. And I'll go back to see if we got any additional questions. I have Toya also mentioned that I realized that I experience bitterness and resentment when someone I love doesn't want my help or don't appreciate it. I know I don't have my license, but I definitely have worked in this field for very long. So I do have other, accolades, other professional and educational tools behind me when I say that is also back to that whole abandonment, that needing to people please, that needing to be validated, that needing to be seen. You want to be helpful. You want to feel like that person needs you, right? They respect how you feel and what you think, but when they don't take it, it's not about you. And I think that that's probably the biggest thing that I've learned in this last year. Hashima touched on it too. When you start seeing people for their whole selves and you start seeing people for their traumas, that grace is something serious. I have a level of grace that I never thought I'd be able to have, because I've started seeing folks beyond me, that when they're not taking that help, when they're not, listening to me, that it has nothing to do with me. And I shouldn't take that personal. People have to find their own way. They have to take the meat and spit out the bones, or whatever it is I'm saying. And it's okay. It doesn't mean that I'm not, important to them. It's not a reflection of my own worth. And so I hope that helps. Hashima, what else can you add for Toya about that bitterness and resentment?
So that's heavily, again, connected to codependency. So remember, the overarching of codependency is the need to be needed. And so, of course, if that need is not being met, it can be internalized and taken personally. So again, the culprit there is that codependency piece. One other thing I want to, add as it relates to releasing past pain, is I want to jump back to that forgiveness piece. Okay. Anytime we feel pain, emotional pain, what is really connected to, and at the pit of it all, what we're saying is, you weren't who I wanted you to be. Okay. And you didn't show up how I felt like you should. And so that is what stirs us, when we're talking about past pains, or this situation didn't pan out the way I felt it should. And so, one of the things that I encourage people to do is to, if you have somebody or a situation or circumstance that you're holding in that space of, I haven't released this, a good mantra to say, and maybe, I don't know, Santé, we can type this in the chat, is, I forgive XYZ for not being who I wanted them to be. I forgive them and I set free. And so, forgiveness is a heavy part, of replacing that tape of, basically, this person wasn't my expectation and I'm mad about it. Okay. And that includes us. Sometimes we have to forgive ourselves in that way when we believe that we haven't lived up to whatever expectation that we have set for ourselves.
I like one of the biggest lessons that I've had is that people can't show up to the people or be the people that I want them to be, because sometimes they just aren't them and they just don't know how to. And that's a trauma response for them too. Or no one ever gave them the example. And although, I really want, or I can see the potential in them reaching that place or reaching that person that I want them to be, I have to learn that people are just who they are. And either I can accept them at where they are, or I can let them go. And that is a really hard pill. I think we put a lot of pressure on each other to meet the void that we need or that we have. And that's really not up to other folks to do that. That's up to you to do that. You have to fill yourself up. You have to fill the void. And when you come and have other people in your life, they just supposed to enhance that. They're an incentive, they're an additive, but they are not the foundation in you filling that void. So when you start to take accountability for that void and you start taking accountability for what you want to be and what you need something to be, it just hits different with other people. You start being a lot less angry. I'm a lot less angry. I'm a lot less resentful. I'm a lot less frustrated when I'm going in that direction.
It's really about, just like we don't want people holding us, all the time to their standards or levels. I'm a serious advocate of, let people be who they want to be, because ultimately that's going to show you who they rather be. Okay. And then from there, you can decide if you want to participate. Oftentimes, in the therapeutic process, specifically with couples, it's just all this complaining about, this person's not this person's not that, this person's not this. And it's like, at what point are you just going to go get who you want instead of trying to mold this person?
Yeah.
Go get who you want. Yeah. And it's not personal. It's not personal.
I am getting some weird person in YouTube, but I'm glad everybody can't see the weird person. I make sure they're blocked so they can't make any more weird comments. So sorry if I wasn't mentally present for a second. We have Marcellus here, who says, how do we define the line between being loyal to someone and being loyal to oneself or ourselves? I can be loyal, but I'm not going to be stupid. How do we pinpoint that? Ooh, I love this question. I'm gonna let you take it first, Hashima, then I got comments, but go ahead.
Yeah. Well, it's simple. You're the most permanent person in your life. So you show up for you first and foremost. Okay. This is something I've learned in recent years, and it's so liberating. Show up for yourself first. And the loyalty is number one to you. And to, as long as you're operating with a pure heart and good intentions, there's always win in that. And if you have connections that consistently kind of test loyalty, then the real question is, are those the connections for you?
I agree with that 100%, Hashima. And also, I'm going to say, unlearn what people told you loyalty looks like. I think that's the real root of the issue. I think that we've been taught to believe that loyalty means ride or die, no matter what, and without boundaries. One of the best gifts I've ever given myself in recent years. Now, I like to tell everybody, y'all, if you watch the show, I say I'm 25, but I'm not really 25. In my 39 years and almost 40, I'm almost 40 in just a few short months. My biggest gift I've recently gave to myself was boundaries in my relationships and my interactions with folks, with myself, and how I allow myself to show loyalty, because we have been trained, we have been taught that loyalty means through no matter what. Like you show up for somebody no matter what. We get taught that for family, like that's still family. Like, yeah, they disrespect you, they make you feel horrible, they mistreat you, but that's family. So unlearn what your ideology of loyalty looks like, because that's probably a big root of the issue. Loyalty doesn't mean that you have to stand with somebody no matter what. It's okay for you to pour into yourself, to Hashima's point. It's okay to be loyal to yourself first, your own boundaries. So unlearn that. Unlearn that loyalty means that you have to stick by somebody hook or crook, no matter what they do to you, no matter how much they mistreat you or make you feel low or drag you into the ditch. If you love them and you're loyal to them, you're going to give them the opportunity. Like, no, because you have to take care of yourself. So I would say that that you learn that, and that you start giving yourself the gift of boundaries. It is the 9:08 mark. I want to check in and see if there's any more questions for Hashima, who has been amazing. Hashima, thank you so much for being here and having the talk with me. So dope. Just such jewels, such important things. Hopefully we'll have you back again. You enjoyed talking to us so much, you'll come back. Maybe think about it a little bit.
I'm always a friend of We Gon Talk. So.
Oh yes, I love it. I love it. I can't wait to have you back. Toya says this needs to be 2 hours. We used to have it 2 hours in the past, and then we noticed that was really long for people on a Wednesday. We would kind of lose, our viewers past a certain point.
Ain't nobody doing nothing this week.
Listen, because this is so you're like, so this week it should be 2 hours. Because it's the holiday, so it's like ain't nobody got nothing to do this week. Like, y'all be all right. Ain't nobody going to work.
Even if they showing up somewhere, they ain't there.
They ain't there. They just showing up, right? They're present, but they ain't present. If you guys want and think that this is an important conversation, we always have those topics where we revisit them again. There is no topic that we can't revisit and talk more about. So I'll have to put that out on Hashima's radar and see if she'll be able to come back and do a part 2 about letting go of the pain. What are your closing thoughts and comments for everybody, Hashima? We always end our show with everybody giving a closing thought on letting go of the pain. So share with everybody what those closing thoughts are for you.
So my closing thoughts would be, once again, releasing the pain is for you. It doesn't mean that you drop the lesson. It doesn't mean that you drop what you gain, but it means that I'm not going to have an emotional attachment to, one of my classrooms. in this life. And so ultimately saying, I'm gonna release it. It's not personal and it's not permanent. And so we make it permanent. Adult humans are the only people that make ourselves and others pay over and over and over again. And so, if we can get back to the minds of children, that they forget 3 minutes later, until we teach them that they shouldn't. And so I think, releasing the past through forgiveness is a huge one. Again, who have you held within your expectations? Was it a fair balance, in the weight, that you gave them, or what you put on them, and ultimately, if you're not getting what you want from a connection, or that connection is not showing up in the way that you feel worthy, or you feel seen, or you feel understood, then it's okay to say that, this is not the connection for me. It doesn't make anybody, a bad person. And so I think, many times, and I say that because we stay in circumstances, jobs, and relationships far after they're over, and then we mad. But the thing is, was it about the person's behavior, or was it about the time that you needed to accept it? Was it about the circumstances being bad, the job being bad, or was it really about, are you really angry at yourself for the amount of time you didn't want to know it? You didn't want to see it. So again, blame is so much easier than guilt. And so those are my final thoughts. And, I really hope that, each and every person out here finds liberation and peace, and makes peace, with past experiences.
Thanks. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. Before I share my closing thoughts, I just want to get some of these comments, so I, let y'all know I am seeing what y'all say in here. I'm not ignoring y'all. We have, this was too short. Okay, I hear you, Marcellus. I hear you. I was ready to pour me another drink and get deep. Well, you can still do that. That's your time. Pour you a drink and get deep. Sometimes we gotta get deep with ourselves. So there's still time, Marcellus. There's still time. Toya, I so appreciate this. Marcellus says, I like how you said that. Don't get attached to my classroom. Absolute facts. And my closing thoughts are that, it's okay for you not to know how to get past the pain today. What's not okay is that you don't try to find a way to do that. I think sometimes it's really hard for us to move forward together because we're not doing that work. We're so stuck in what has happened, what has been done, and we don't know how to get past it, that we don't even try. And so I want to encourage each of you to take some time to figure out how to move past the pain. You don't have to forget. Moving past the pain doesn't mean that you absolving those that hurt you. It doesn't mean that they're right for what they did. It just means that you don't want to be held back any longer for what has happened, because it is holding you back. And whether you realize it or not, I guarantee that when you start doing the digging and you start pulling things up from the root, you are going to see that this stuff has absolutely held you back. And so let it go. And you don't have to start on January 1. You can start today. I hope that this is the segue for a lot of you to start doing that work immediately, to realize that you need to let go. Write a list, burn it, just find different ways to let go of that pain and release it. But you're better than that. And you have so much more that's waiting for you on the other side. And so it's not going to be easy. I hate for people to think that therapeutic process, that healing process is easy. Some days it's going to be rainbows and some days it's going to be trenches. But it's all part of the process, and trust the process. It will get you to a better space. And we need to get our next generations to the next space. This is exactly why we have these conversations, because our children's children need to be better. They deserve it. So thank y'all all for being with us tonight. Thank y'all for these comments. Thank y'all for just being present. I want to see y'all back. Remember, we are bi-weekly Wednesdays. So our next show, our first show of the year, will be coming. Let me just give y'all an exact date. so I don't misspeak here. We will be back again until the 11th. So come back on January 11th. That's a Wednesday for We Gon Talk, bi-weekly Wednesdays. You can find us on those streaming outlets that we mentioned previously. I am so glad y'all are with us tonight, and hopefully I'll see y'all next time. Good night, everybody. Thank y'all. Hashima, you did that. I appreciate you. Thank you so much. That was